So maybe to start things off, yeah. And by the way, so I'm going to ask a few questions. We're going to take about half an hour. We might extend a little bit beyond the 30-minute part of the hour. Alan Avery over here at the side. So when I get to the point, we can take questions from the audience. Please flag Alan down, and he'll bring the microphone to you. And just certainly just stand and state your name and your company. Thank you. So we've heard quite a bit, and maybe to give our speakers, a little bit of a break, maybe Mike Brooks, maybe we might, start with you. So we've talked a lot about human performance and the things that are really important to succeed. We've talked about a re-architecture of our systems, and perhaps we're not going fast enough in order to achieve operational excellence or transformation. So really, in terms of if integrated IT and OT technologies are important, why is this not happening, and what are some of the fundamental issues? Mike, you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I think Bruce hit a lot. Yeah, he really hit the nail on the head. Of course, we're all in love with technology. We fall in love with it. We fall in the buzzwords, but then we start ignoring some of the things that Bruce has said. And one of the things I've been interested in this for, gosh, I started this probably 14 years ago at Chevron when I was looking at what the IT infrastructure needed to be. And I was convinced then it's about having many applications that need to work together and to interoperate so I get the best out of it. And I might do that first by linking them with the operator involved, but I might be thinking forward to say, how can I do this without the operator? How can I automate this? And this has been fundamental to me in my last job working at MTEL. We started off from this, and again, to agree with Bruce, one of the things I tried to do was understand that technology by itself will not move the needle. You do have to have the things that Bruce said. And when I look at that, you need a technology, you need a methodology, understanding what do I have to do to actually make this work? What work do I have to be involved? What skills do I need? And then thirdly, what's the work process that's involved when I have to deal with it? Those are all human issues. So when we started this, we're saying, well, how can we build this into the software so it's automatic? Because if you go out and buy the technology, you can go to one of your consultants, you'll get a kit, it'll be toolkit, it'll be hard to do, but you have to then invent the way that you're going to use it, the methodology, and then the work process. And later, the idea is I want to be able to make this software in the manner that the people who are receiving this already work with the skill sets they've already got, and that fits precisely with the work process that they've got. Because I don't want to be involved in huge cultural changes if I can avoid it.
Thanks, Mike. How about you, David? You have a response? IT and OT technologies, integration, what's really holding us back? Why are we not moving quicker?
So probably a couple things. I see three tendencies. There's a departmental isolation. So the assets group, APM, the EHS group, operations, they all have say over what they have say over. Then there's all the management systems, they're bifurcated. And then all the data systems. We have point solutions to platforms. So we got to harmonize all this stuff. So to me, to drive the interoperability or the efficiency and effectiveness and not focus on compliance, that should just be a byproduct of efficiency and effectiveness. We need to relook at all those things. We need to step back, and really we need a strategy. So how do we go from good to great? What's that look like? And then realistically, how do you bring that into your culture? So when Bruce talked about it, the people side, it's getting wins. The old days of buy this software, spend millions of dollars, and you hope your culture takes to it. Let's do a POC. Let's do a pilot. Let's do lessons learned, and let's not say that one size fits all. So all these things you got to look at, but I think it's those silos that we got to break down, those three areas.
Anybody else on the panel want to offer a response, or should we move on? Okay. So interoperability, technology platforms, there seems to be a human aspect here that maybe we're not addressing. So let's talk about sharing. Not everybody likes to share. Maybe it's a bit hard to share data. What's holding us back? What would you recommend for companies to really help them share, even if we had a good platform? What can we do? Anybody want to answer that? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, try not to be a microphone hog. So I think one of the things that's missing is Bruce had a bullet, conduct of operations. We need an operations management system. If you want to look at human performance, uh, look at process safety and conduct of operations. If you're in a hydrocarbon business, bring those two together. So the operational discipline's the goal. But if we still say do we want trained people or competent people running our facilities? Well, I hope you want competent people, not just trained people. So having a learning management system and just doing remote training isn't going to lead to competency. You get skills and knowledge, right? And there's 3 forms of learning. There's on-the-job training, but you really need to look at Bloom's taxonomy or have competency structure. Do a competency assessment. Those gaps drive what training to provide. And we need hands-on time. I heard somebody in an earlier paper today talk about we don't have enough people to go walk around with the experienced folks before they leave. Well, you got to have a 90-day short services employee onboarding process where you're not going to impart knowledge and wisdom. They're just going to have skills and do CPTs at their desk, and that's just not getting it done, right? So that you need the sustainable organization of people side. So you got to have a competency-based culture, not training-based cultures in the future.
I'll just maybe add something to that, to what David said, and I think Bruce hit that one towards the tail end. Don't underestimate the power of creating cross-functional teams and the culture that is open and willing to share the knowledge and work together. That is significantly important as we go towards converging IT and OT, because nothing really works by itself, and those teams are really the real power to get the work done in a consistent manner to achieve the objectives.
Yeah, and I would add to that, we have the silos that David talked to. We have applications that do excellent work in those silos, but to get to the peak of efficiency, they've got to drive together. That's going to mean people have to collaborate, and also the applications have to collaborate. And I think, as I've said before, the thing that drives this is the work process. How do we manage the work process to make sure that I'm in a decision-making mode now, something's happened, where does all the information get to me so I can make the appropriate decision? How do I manage the workflow consistently? I can get a simple example of an operator. He wants to line up a crude tank. He has to look at 5, 6 different systems in order to decide that he's going to do the appropriate thing, the appropriate work process. That's looking at the assay. That's looking at the lab. That's looking at the reliability system, maybe the trends, all those. How do we help him do that job? It's about getting those operations. And you won't get this solved if you just take the data and dump it onto a platform. We did that 15 years ago with data warehouses. 50% of those failed because we didn't know what we were going to do with them before we built them. I see the same thing happening today with IoT and those kinds of things. So we start from the business of the problem that needs to be solved, and then drive the technology towards that, taking into account the human factors.
Yeah, I think one of the things we have to think about as well. Can they hear me with this? Or can you hear me with this?
Yep.
Well, they said maybe. I think one of the things we have to keep in mind as well is, honestly, to me, it's not a race. We need to go as fast as we should go with the appropriate due diligence to make sure that we're doing the right things at the right time. I like your comment about IoT. There's a lot of really neat things you can do with that, but what's the business value? All these opportunities should be led by we're solving a business problem to drive value to the companies that we work in, and also to provide additional cybersecurity benefits, because this technology can do that as well. But it has to be led by the value proposition. And so what are we doing to move faster? I think we need to take a step back and make sure we're working on the right problems.
Other comments? Bruce?
And again, it's just based on building off from what I was expressing earlier. To me, organizationally, it's all about clear roles, definitions, and trust. It's the difference between watching a MLS soccer match versus Pee Wee soccer. MLS, everybody's playing their position and there's trust. Everybody has trained skill, they have skills, competencies, and everybody on the field has trust in their ability to perform. And so they can do backward passes, blind passes. They know that there's somebody there covering that part of the field. What I see so often in all of these implementations is it's like a pee-wee soccer team with 20 kids in a scrum around the ball kicking and end up kicking each other in the shin. And again, I go back, to me, it's about the clarity of the mission and the role that you're playing for that mission. It's not about individual ownership. And that's where I see everything gets wrapped up, whether let's face it, with IT and OT, what's the big issue? It's ownership. Where's the demarcation? That's what everybody would scream about. Is it at the process control network layer? You add in cybersecurity, that crosses over it, and it's always about ownership. It's got to be about the mission, the trust, and the understanding of the roles that everybody is expected to play. And the trust in all of those membership and the transparency and the communication so that it doesn't end up at a scrum where everybody walks away with bruised shins. That's my 2 cents.
So I'll ask another question before I go to the audience. Well, there's a lot of people in attendance here today. Some have small companies, big companies, they're asset owners, they have mature organizations, they have less mature organizations, and we have people that make technology that sell into these organizations. So what should they do in terms of advice for these companies to help break down these barriers between IT and OT? What are the number one things that they need to do?
The suppliers?
The asset owners, yeah. Where do they start? Is it organizational design? Do they?
Well, no, I don't think it's organizational design. Don't start there, because you need to determine if you need to reorg anything at all. I would say you need to start with what problems are you trying to solve that are tied to business value, and having that shared consciousness, having the clarity of roles and responsibilities, getting the right people in the room to make sure that you're actually working on a problem that's going to create some value. I think a lot of folks can get very excited about the buzzwords, the technology, the art of the possible. But if all those things aren't solving real problems, then they're really just wasting time. And time is one of the most critical assets that we have in this business. So we need to focus our critical resources on solving the highest value problems.
I mean, just listen to the asset owners and understand the pain points that we have. Don't come up with the technology or solution that's not implementable. Oftentimes I've seen something that looks awesome, but when you look at it, I don't have a way to implement that. It requires a transition plan that I would never get approved if I were to go and ask for that kind of money. So, trying to come up with the pragmatic approaches that we can actually go and implement to solve the problems that is facing our company.
So I'd like to add to that, because I see this, I see the technology, I see people get excited, I see the buzzwords, the IoT, the digitalization, all those kinds of things, and I hear companies calling these the initiatives. I have news for you. They are not the initiatives. The initiative generally for us in manufacturing is always to improve operational excellence. And these technologies might support you. And going back to what you said, you want to start from the business, make sure to take a small one, solve the problem, expand it from there. Get some easy wins, but make sure you're talking about a business problem that needs to be solved. And with my own personal bias, when you do a KPI chart for a manufacturing facility and you've gotten past the license to operate, the safety, environmental, and compliance, the number one thing after that, the first one in anybody's initiative ought to be, I got to keep the equipment running. Number one before anything else.
Thanks, Mike. Any questions from the attendees? Just raise your hand, please, and Alan will bring the mic over. Right up front, Alan.
Hi, I'm Jose Rivera with the Control System Integrators Association. Yesterday, for the first panel that we had 3 end users stating that their APM was something that they saw a lot of potential in, they had been investing in, but they could not see the return on investment yet. I was shocked because APM has been around for a very long time. It has been one of those models, one of those technologies where it has been a proven business model. And 3 leading end users, process and discrete, were saying that they were not seeing the ROI. Can you comment on that? I'm still shocked.
I can comment on that. Some APM doesn't work as well as other APM solutions. You want a good solution? Come talk to me afterwards.
Yeah, that's a vendor. Let's get an OPCO in here. It's again, how can I say this? Yeah, it's not about the tool. I mean, it's about, oh, Jesus, can't believe I'm lost for words here. It's not about the tool or the technology or the capability. It's about the cultural commitment and understanding what the real problems are. It's more the commitment of the organization to leverage what's being given them or provided to them to generate it. As I said earlier, I've seen many applications go in and just go down in failure. By all design, it should have worked and should have generated, monumental benefits. And it's all that human aspect, and what I've seen change in the APM is as I'm doing investigations in that, is the root causes are changing with respect to what is generating the source of the failures. But the failures are still occurring. Now the failures, I will say, one thing that I think masks it when they say they're not seeing the returns is that again, just personal observation, I don't have any statistics, the failures, the mean time between repairs, the mean time between failures is increasing very admirably. But when they fail, they're catastrophic. So from a financial perspective, it's we just have fewer, but the ones that are occurring are larger. And so that's where they get masked to me, where they're, whether they're getting the financial benefits on it or not.
David, looks like you had an answer. Should I move on?
Real quick, just a couple things. I think the APM of old, and again, that term's misused by vendors a lot. APM has a lot of moving parts. So to me, if you're not having an asset strategy or doing something, tactics or an inspection data management system, right? So RCM is a good example. It takes a lot of time. I'm trained in Aladon, right? But you can go get an asset strategy library today with the cloud and content and greatly reduce the time to value realization. Or you can put cheeks and chairs with a practitioner. And one guy yesterday with a power company said it took them 8 days to do one piece of equipment. And they had thousands of pieces of equipment. They said they couldn't justify it. So part of this fourth industrial revolution is APM is still APM, but think different. What's possible today? Use the tools at your disposal. When you do a root cause analysis, do you ever see MOC as a root cause of failure? Or does your organization miss it? 90% of the time they miss MOC because process safety is in a silo and APM's in its own world. But mechanical integrity is part of process safety, right? So we got to unlock these silos again. And we got to look at APM, get away from the human intensive approaches to all this data we got to cleanse and all these things we got to do. There's better ways to the world.
Thanks, David. So 2 more questions. I'll ask one question, then we'll take one question from the audience. So what I didn't see here is the usual pyramid of the Purdue model. So many applications are architected with manufacturing operations management at level 3, or MES, manufacturing execution systems, and the control systems. I didn't see any of that. So I guess my question to the panelists is the Purdue model dead?
Having actually worked with Dr. Williams on the Purdue model, I don't think it's dead. I think it's just part of the operating culture. I mean, it's always the benchmark reference point. I just don't think it's the driving factor that everybody kind of addresses it, or it's, to me, institutionalized. I think it'll always be until somebody comes up with different. No matter how you decompose it, people are always going to stratify it to provide a reference point back to that Purdue model. The one point I will make about the Purdue work and the Purdue model, the stratification of that model and the three overlapping circles of people, process, and technology that everybody knows is a minor representation of the body of that work. In that Purdue, if you get all three volumes of that work, it defines the prerequisites of what comes first. What are the touch points? What are the prerequisites to achieve excellence as you migrate up in all of those circles? And that's what always gets lost, is everybody just has that reference graphic, the three overlapping circles, and they miss the three volumes of intellectual property that was developed that is behind those elements. And I struggle and get frustrated because it is lost, because that part hasn't changed.
I'll add to what Bruce said. I think it's there and alive. It's a reference model that keeps us grounded. Bruce, at Dow, we're looking at people, process, technology, and because of the influx of the revolution, let's say, digital IoT, especially we are adding data as a fourth component because we got to deal with that. And how do we do that? So the current reference model just pushes data from the SCADA system and all over the place, and that is what is making it difficult. So kind of adding the fourth component and figuring out what's the right way to do it and how do you bring that data into the picture such in a manner that is secured, and then we can analyze it to make the decision is really what's going to drive it. But I think the model itself is still the reference model that's going to keep us grounded in how do we actually connect the systems together.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. It is a reference model, and it's a good way to communicate how capabilities should be categorized and grouped together. I think when people say the Purdue model is being challenged, they're typically talking about using the Purdue model as a network design. And then from that perspective, I think there are different ways to look at how do you design networks so that you get that effective and secure communication with all the right control points, making sure that you have the appropriate segmentation. Dale Peterson had a very good speech about this at the 2019 S4 conference that you can YouTube.
Any questions from the audience? Alan, one over here.
Hi, Adidora. My question, I wanted to get your thoughts on developing solutions in-house. I know we see a lot of things that are now available that are open source, and there's a theme of collaborating, but within the industry, obviously, everyone likes to have a competitive advantage. So what are your thoughts on solutions being developed in-house versus it being sourced?
Good question.
I think I can speak to that, having worked 10 years with ExxonMobil and 14 years with Chevron. And I remember about 14 years ago getting up before 6 CIOs from the various operating divisions and basically imploring them to first own our own problems instead of giving them to Accenture. And then after that, getting the right people to solve the problems. And I told them explicitly, the best programmers do not work for Chevron. They're going to work for Microsoft and Google and Facebook. And basically, we need the external people to do that. For Chevron, and it probably goes for Exxon too, our core competence is boiling oil, not writing code. And I'll tell you, I see the same thing happening right now with data scientists and how they need to be deployed for solving these problems. I take a different approach. When I first approached this in 2011, I said to the guys I was working with, I read that we're going to need 200,000 more data scientists by the year 2020. We're here now. And I said, if you think that's going to happen, there aren't enough kids in school to get that done. And also, if you think that's the way the problem's going to get solved, it will not get solved. So the idea about this is to maybe obfuscate the details of that and make it work for the people who are expected to use it.
Another perspective on it is working for an opcos is a delineation of what you're developing and whether it is a strategic or competitive advantage for your organization, unique to something that that organization is doing. I think that has to, then the solution has to reflect the culture and the process of that uniqueness. The difference being things like GL, AR, AP, that kind of stuff, it's a commodity. Go buy it, get the outside resources, and I really make the distinction there. The other footnote I'll put on that is just the advent now of low-code environments, where now we're talking about building applications where domain experts with no coding skills can develop and Lego block in these environments very, very complex work processes. We're putting things together in 6 to 8 weeks with no sophisticated coding techniques. So I think there's an evolution that we're going to be going through soon of just assembling widgets and components. Some of these low-code environments, you can just link into external widgets that are published by Google. So if you're developing an application and you need GIS, I can link to it and it takes no code. And I think that is where the evolution is going to be, where anybody as a domain expert can develop an application.
Thanks, Bruce. Well, it's 20 minutes to the hour. Thank you all very much for attending, and join me in thanking the panelists.